I was driving through the night, the road stretching out like a black ribbon of anxiety beneath my tires. I had started in New York, a place I was glad to leave behind. The noise, the crowds, the constant pressure, none of it felt real anymore. North Carolina was my destination, a new job waiting for me like some kind of salvation. But the miles between here and there were starting to play tricks on my mind. It was later than it should have been, really, and the highway was deserted, except for the occasional flicker of headlights from a distant car. I hadn't seen another soul for miles when I first noticed them. Men in suits, just standing there on the side of the road. At first I thought they might be hitchhikers, but they didn't move. They just stood there, hands by their sides, staring straight ahead as if they were waiting for something or someone. I shook my head, tried to blink them away. But they didn't disappear. They multiplied. Every few miles, another one would appear, always in a dark suit, always just standing there. The closer I got to North Carolina, the more of them I saw, until it felt like the highway was lined with them, their eyes boring into my skull. I pulled into a rest stop. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely keep the car on the road. I got out, lit a cigarette, and leaned against the hood, hoping the cold air would clear my head. But even then, I could feel their eyes on me, even though I couldn't see them. I crushed the cigarette under my heel and got back in the car, desperate to keep moving, to outrun whatever was out there on the road. The next morning, I walked into my interview on autopilot. My eyes felt gritty, my mouth dry. I was halfway through answering a question when I saw him, one of the men from the highway, sitting across from me in the flesh. The same suit, the same dead eyes. I felt my heart hammering in my chest, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. My words fumbled and tripped over themselves, and I could see the disappointment in the interviewer's eyes, but I couldn't stop staring at him. By the time it was over, I was drenched in sweat, my shirt clinging to my back. I stumbled out of the office, my thoughts a tangled mess of fear and confusion. Had I imagined it? Was he real? Or was my mind playing some kind of sick joke on me? When I told my therapist about it later, she just smiled, that calm, condescending smile of hers. Stress, she said. Exhaustion. You've been under a lot of pressure. It's not uncommon for the mind to manifest fears in the form of hallucinations. It's your body's way of telling you to slow down. But even as she spoke, I could see them in my mind's eye, those men in suits, lining the highway, their faces blank and unreadable. They were waiting. And I had the sickening feeling that one day I'd find out exactly what they were waiting for. It's funny how you never think about dying on a lonely stretch of Pennsylvania road, not until it's almost too late. I was just driving to clear my head, you know. The kind of drive where you feel the hum of the tires more than hear it, and your thoughts float in and out like the lines on the highway. It was well past midnight when I pulled into this rickety old gas station, one of those places that looks like it's been there since the Eisenhower administration. The sign flickered, barely holding on to its last few watts of life, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. The clerk inside looked half asleep, head bobbing with a rhythm only he could hear. I filled up, paid the man, and that's when I noticed him, the stranger. He was leaning against his truck, an old, beat-up thing that might have once been red, but was now a patchwork of rust and regret. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there, staring. You know that feeling when you're sure someone's watching you, but you can't quite catch them at it? Yeah, it was like that. I shrugged it off and told myself I was being paranoid. People watch people all the time. No big deal, right? But as I got back on the road, something felt off, like a cold finger tracing the back of my neck. I drove on, the darkness pressing in from all sides. Then, without warning, the car jolted a flat tire. I pulled over, heart pounding, and that's when I saw the truck again. Same rust, same regret, same stranger. This time, he was closer. My hands were shaking as I dialed 911, whispering into the phone like my life depended on it. Hell, maybe it did. The operator's voice was a lifeline, but I didn't trust it to keep me safe. I left the car, slipping into the woods like some frightened deer. I could hear my own breath, loud and ragged, as I crouched behind a tree. The truck's headlights cut through the trees, and I swear I could feel his eyes searching for me, trying to lock onto my hiding spot. Then, out of nowhere, another car pulled up. A motorist, brave or stupid, maybe both, stopped to help. The stranger didn't like that. He didn't like that at all. His truck roared to life, tires spinning gravel as he tore out of there. The motorist found me and coaxed me out of the woods like a stray dog. He didn't ask questions, just waited with me until the cops and tow truck arrived. As they hauled my car away, I kept thinking about that truck, those eyes, and how close I'd come to disappearing on a back road in Pennsylvania. Maybe it was just a bad night, or maybe it was something worse. But as I drove away in the tow truck, the dark woods slipping past, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was still watching me. It started with the snow. Not the light, fluffy kind that makes you think of Christmas and hot cocoa, but the thick, wet kind that sticks to everything and turns the world into a suffocating white blur. I was headed to see Tom, my boyfriend of 6 months, when the storm hit. The road disappeared beneath the onslaught, and I could barely see the taillights in front of me. My hands were clamped tight on the steering wheel, knuckles white, when I decided it wasn't worth dying over. Tom could wait. I'd find a place to stay and ride it out. That's when I saw the diner, its neon sign flickering in the swirling snow. I pulled in, grateful for the warmth that hit me when I stepped inside. It was one of those small, greasy places with old vinyl booths and a jukebox in the corner that probably hadn't worked in years. The few other patrons looked like they'd been there for hours, maybe longer. I ordered coffee and started to explain my situation to the waitress, an older woman with tired eyes, when a voice cut in from the counter. "Storm's only gonna get worse," he said. I looked over and saw a man in a dirty flannel shirt and a trucker cap that hid most of his face. "You'd be better off at the Pine Lodge, just up the road. Cheap, and they don't ask too many questions." I hesitated. Something about him put me on edge, but he wasn't wrong. I couldn't keep driving in this. I thanked him and paid for my coffee, then headed back out into the storm. The Pine Lodge was exactly what I expected, rundown, with a cracked sign and a dark parking lot. The guy at the front desk barely looked up as he handed me the key, his fingers yellowed from years of smoking. Room 12. The number felt ominous, but I shook it off. Just nerves, I told myself. The room was small, cold, and smelled faintly of mildew, but I didn't care. I was exhausted. I locked the door, bolted it for good measure, and tossed my bag on the bed. I was just about to run a hot bath when I heard the unmistakable sound of the door creaking open. My heart stopped. I was sure I had locked it. I rushed to the bathroom, grabbed the first thing I could find, a rusty pair of scissors, and held my breath. Footsteps. Slow and deliberate. They weren't coming from inside the room, but from the hallway outside. I peeked through the crack in the bathroom door and saw them, wet footprints leading from the doorway to the bed, and then back out again. They weren't mine. I glanced out the window and saw a shadowy figure leaning against a car, the same man from the diner. Toby, he'd said his name was. He looked up then, straight at me, and smiled. A cold, twisted smile that sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the weather. I didn't think. I just ran. The motel worker didn't even blink when I told him what happened. He just offered me another room, like this sort of thing was normal, like it happened all the time. I didn't take it. I grabbed my keys and drove, snow be damned, not stopping until I reached the next town. I don't know what Toby wanted, and I don't care. I just know I'll never trust a stranger again. Not after that night. Not after the way he looked at me, like I was just another check-in at the Pine Lodge.